Today, I'm going to be ranking every single Vanderlyn gang member by how many crimes they've committed. 95% of my viewers are unsubscribed, so if you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe. In last place, it's Molly O'Shea. I don't even think she was ever wrapped up in the gang's antics the whole time. Like, even when she went to Milton, he was like, oh, Molly didn't tell us anything because she was just didn't have any actual information. And I feel like the whole time she was always like part of the gang, because she was Dutch's lover. But I feel like she never actually got involved in anything the gang did. Like, she never was in any of the raids. She never stole from anyone. She's just kind of there like mooching off of the gang's funds and all, but she wasn't actually committing any crimes. So I think she has to go in the bottom tier, F tier, or the Saint tier. In 23rd place, it's Jack Marson. Like, of course, he's not going to be committing any crimes in Red Dead Redemption 2. And technically, you could say he does do some stuff in Red Dead Redemption 1. But I don't really want to count that because technically he doesn't have to if you don't want him to. And I think Jack, of course, has to be a Saint character in Red Dead Redemption 2. Just because he is a, 6-year-old child. What is he going to do? He's not going to be committing any crimes. Well, technically, you could say, oh my God, he's an accessory. He was just put up to do it by his father and his mother. Like, they're the ones that are actually raising him. And because Abigail, I feel like, is also in a pretty similar place where she doesn't really commit any crimes, Jack definitely also has to go in the Saint tier, same as Molly O'Shea. In 22nd place, I've got Pearson. I think Pearson, pretty similarly to these other characters, isn't really involved in the gang's antics. But at the same time, I feel like compared to Molly at least he has an idea of what's going down in the gang. He is a bigger member of the gang. And yeah, he's at least knowledgeable about it, which is, I guess, a crime in some states at least now. But I mean, this time he wouldn't be charged for anything. But at the same time, he is part of the gang and he is part of stuff at least. So I think he has to go a tier above Jack and Molly, who literally had no idea about any of the crimes. But I still think he is in the D tier, the not a criminal tier. In 21st place, I got Reverend Swanson. While Reverend Swanson clearly did commit some acts of debauchery and he was public drunkenness and whatever, which technically would be crimes now, they definitely wouldn't be crimes in this time. And while, he did steal from the gang and whatnot, all of his crimes were things against people he was already friends with and whatnot, and they're all pretty petty crimes as is. So he clearly isn't a criminal, and I think similarly to Pearson, he did at least have some intimate knowledge of what the gang was doing compared to someone like Molly, which, I know she did have knowledge, but she didn't, have intimate knowledge of what they're necessarily doing. I think Swanson had a little bit more knowledge than Molly, so I think he has to go into the D tier, the not a criminal tier, as well as Pearson, but I think he at least did a couple more things than Pearson did, and Pearson was at least a little bit more responsible. So I think he's going to have to go one slot above, still in the not a criminal tier. In 20th place, we got Abigail Roberts. Well, Abigail did at least participate in the Saint Denis bank robbery. She basically doesn't have any other times where she's actually, being a criminal, and she wants John to back down from his life as a criminal. So while she is an accessory in one crime as a robbery, she's not actually the main character in the robbery. She's just the distraction for the robbery. So I don't know if I'd even consider her actually part of the robbery at all. I don't know exactly what she was doing. I mean, you never get to see it, but I don't really consider her as a criminal from being in one thing. And while she might have been in a lot more things when she was younger, just during the game, she's not a criminal at all and wants John to get out of the criminal life. So I think she also has to go in that D tier with Swanson and Pearson because she doesn't really do any criminal acts the entire game. In 19th place, I've got Mary Beth. Mary Beth is involved in a couple robberies and whatnot there, and she does feed a lot of information to the gang, but she's not directly involved in any of them. She's just kind of the setup man, similar to Abigail, but I feel like she's a little bit more involved than Abigail is compared to some of these other guys, especially in this stagecoach robbery right here, where she is the main target to get everyone set up and whatnot. So I think she is a little bit more involved, so I'm going to put her in C tier, the non-violent criminals, but still she's not really a criminal at all. She just has a couple criminal incidents. While Trelawney does have a lot more criminal incidents than Mary Beth, he's in 18th place just because there's nothing ever violent about his thing. Basically, everything he does is taking from the rich and giving to himself. But still, at the same time, it's always non-violent stuff. He just tricks stupid people out of their money and whatnot. And he's never the one actually, I mean, he is the one masterminding the plans, but he's not the one that's bringing in the guns and whatnot. So I don't think he is a bad guy at all. I mean, he definitely is a criminal for sure, but there's never any violence in there. So I think his crimes have to be taken at a lot less of a level than someone like, I don't know, Arthur, who actually does the murdering. So I think Trelawney also has to go into C tier for the non-violent criminal. In 17th place, I've got Strauss. Strauss is pretty similar to me to Trelawney. Like, he's not the one actually doing any of these things, but I feel like he at least has a bigger role in the loan scheme and like being a loan shark and being the mastermind behind a loan shark thing where you beat the shit out of people. Feels like you have to get a little bit more like criminal than what like Trelawney does, just scamming people out of their money. You're scamming people out of their money, and if they don't pay you, you're beating the shit out of them. I mean, you're not, but like someone else is for you. So I think Strauss has to be a little bit higher because there at least is like a threat of violence there. But at the same time, Strauss isn't the one actually beating the shit out of people. So I don't think he can go any higher than here. I think he also has to go into C tier because he's not doing anything at all. He's just at home and he's just chilling and making money for the gang. So he's not a violent criminal at all. So he has to go into C tier as well. In 16th place, I've got Tilly. While Tilly doesn't really do anything violent throughout the game, she definitely is an accomplice in at least potentially Anthony Foreman's murder and the murder of any of the other Foreman brothers. So I think she has to go a little bit higher than all these other people because at least she's an accomplice to murders, which I don't think Strauss, Trelawney, or Mary Beth ever were. So I think she goes a little bit higher, but she doesn't really do much besides like stealing from people and getting captured by the Foremans at this point. So I think she has to go into B tier, accomplice to a criminal, but she's not actually a violent criminal at all. In 15th place, I've got Kieran Duffy, who, again, pretty similarly to Tilly, he's not the one doing the actual killing. Like, he does save Arthur here, and like technically you could call that like third-degree murder, manslaughter, but he's not a violent criminal, and I don't think he's in any of the other missions where they kill anyone besides this one where he saves Arthur. And you could say, yeah, again, it's manslaughter, it's self-defense here. So I think he's a criminal accomplice because, he's in this whole thing and where they're murdering all the O'Driscolls. So, I mean, he has to be an accomplice no matter what. But I still think compared to a lot of these other people, he's not the one actually doing the shooting, and he's only shot out of self-defense or out of saving his friend Arthur here. So I think he also has to go in the C tier with Tilly because, he's not really doing anything that bad, but he is an accomplice to people who did some murdering. In 14th place, we got Miss Grimshaw. Well, Miss Grimshaw doesn't commit that many crimes. She does have an intimate knowledge of the entire gang. Definitely helps people plan out everything. And she does murder Molly O'Shea. So at least second-degree murder with that. And I just think in general, because she was so involved in the gang's doings of everything, she would definitely be locked up for a long time if they all did get caught because, she was a big member of the gang. So while I don't think she, was the biggest one doing everything, and I feel like it's kind of hard to lump her in with a lot of these other people who are like actual murderers on a large scale, she definitely has to be in the A tier of the hardened criminal thing just because of how long she spent with the gang and the fact that she murdered Molly O'Shea in pretty cold blood. In 13th place, I've got Karen Jones. I think she also is pretty similar to Miss Grimshaw. She's not fully integrated in the gang, and she's not like a full gunslinger like all these other people. But if you do play the robbery, she does murder someone if the cops catch up to you, if the sheriff catches up to you. And if not, she is still involved in a gunfight here and probably shoots some people. So she definitely would be on a higher level than a lot of the other women in the gang because she actually involves herself in some of the heists, and like she does shoot people, time to time. I feel like she's a lot more feisty than a lot of these other people and is a lot more of a robber. So I think she is a bigger part than some of these other people. I don't think she's as much of a hardened criminal as some of these other people in this list, but she still is a hardened criminal. I still think she has to go in A tier, the hardened criminal tier. In 12th place, I've got Uncle. While Uncle doesn't do much in the game to actually shoot other people, he is involved in a couple missions where, of course, he does kill some people, and we don't really know what he did before joining the gang necessarily. So he could have been murdering people, here, there, and everywhere. So I don't want to put him any higher in this list because I don't know what he did before, but he clearly is a hardened criminal. He knows his way with a gun, and he does have a pretty hot hand. He is shooting and killing people, even though he's not that well adjusted, and he just kind of sits on his ass all day. So I definitely think he is an A tier because he is a hardened criminal, but he doesn't do as much to warrant himself any higher just because he's sitting on his ass all day instead of shooting people like a lot of the other people in the gang are. In 11th place, we got Lenny Summers. While Lenny probably hasn't committed as many crimes as maybe someone like Uncle has, just because Uncle's lived for a lot longer, at least during the game's time period, he commits a ton more crimes. So I think I have to put Lenny higher than Uncle, even though Uncle's probably committed more crimes over his lifespan. You just get to see a lot more of Lenny's crimes. I feel like because he takes an active role in the game, like, I think he has to go higher, but just compared to a lot of the other people, because he's been a gunslinger for probably only a couple years at this point, I think he's only been riding with the game for a couple years. I think he has to go at the lowest of this, but he still is an A-tier criminal because he's hardened as fuck. Like, he's been riding with the gang for at least, I think, 6 months, so he's a hardened criminal by this point. In 10th place, about Shawn Maguire. Shawn Maguire has definitely committed a ton of crimes throughout his entire lifespan, but I feel like during the actual game, you don't get to see a lot of them. He does just start yapping about all these, like, oh, I robbed this guy blind and I took all his money and whatever. And, like, he does say he killed a bunch of people, but you technically don't know if he's just talking out of his ass or if those are actually true. I don't know. I would assume it's true just because Shawn is an extremely gifted gunfighter, and he is murdering a lot of people in general with a lot of the other members of the gang, but you don't get to see a lot of it in the actual game, so I really can't put him any higher than 10th place. But at the same time, this guy is clearly someone that knows his way around a gun and robs people and steals stuff from people and does this all the time, so he definitely has to go also as well into the A tier, the hardened criminal tier. In 9th place, about Charles Smith. Charles definitely doesn't commit as many crimes per se as some of the other people on the list, but I think he has to go high up just because if you do this one thing with Charles, he literally murders someone in cold blood because they did, they were poaching the bison and trying to blame it on the Native Americans, but he did kill a guy in cold blood right in front of Arthur, and I just think that kind of puts him a little bit higher than I would have thought otherwise, because if he's doing this here, maybe he's also doing it somewhere else. And well, he also is involved in all the gang's other activities and does shoot and kill a lot of people, even if that's not really his plan. Like, he always wants to take the peaceful way out of things, but at the same time, like in this instance, like he will go for a more hardened approach. So I think he also has to go into A tier just because he has been running with the gang for so long and has committed a lot of bad acts, but he can't go any higher just because he is a nice guy. In 8th place, I've got Javier Javier. Javier clearly has probably committed as many crimes as Charles, but I feel like he's a little bit hardened. And just the fact that he, plays in Red Dead Redemption 1, like you can see him, and he still seems like a criminal there. I feel like you have to put him a little bit higher than Charles. I mean, you don't necessarily know what he did at all, and I feel like he's not that big of a player in Red Dead Redemption 2 where I'd be like, oh my god, this guy's committing so many crimes all the time, but like he definitely is involved in stuff, and just the fact that he's a member of the gang means he is a pretty hardened criminal no matter what. But I think the thing that puts him higher than people like Charles or Shawn is just the fact that he did get to Red Dead Redemption 1, and he was probably committing a lot of crimes over that spree, even if he wasn't committing a lot during Red Dead Redemption 2's time. In 7th place, about Hosea Matthews. Hosea definitely has committed a lot of crimes in his entire life just because he does have an extremely quick hand, and the fact that he's running the Van der Linde gang means he's pulled off a lot of crimes. While he doesn't seem like a super violent offender, I don't know if there's a single time when he actually shoots someone in Red Dead Redemption 2. He is part of the gang, and the fact that if they all got caught, he would be charged pretty highly just because he is second in command. So I think he has to be up there, and just the fact that he's been running with Dutch for so long, he has to have been doing some violent things back in the day. Even if, that's not like his first option, he probably was doing some violent things. So I think he also has to go into A tier. While you don't see him at all during the game, like murdering people and shooting people, he definitely was doing it in his past just because he is such a hardened gunslinger. So he has to go into A tier. In 6th place, I've got Bill Williamson. Bill, isn't doing that much during the events of Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, you don't see him just out there murdering people. While he kind of is just like a grunt for everyone else to use. He's not really smart enough to do a lot of things on his own. While he does, do the Valentine bank robbery. So he might be a little bit smarter than it looks like. But at the same time, Bill isn't going out here just murdering people for the fun of it. And he's not really like a smart enough person to actually be committing first-degree murder. Just the fact that he does run an entire gang in Red Dead Redemption 1 has to put it way higher for me. And the first thing you go into the game and they're like, the Bill Williamson gang has been raping, murdering, and pillaging all of New Austin in Red Dead Redemption 1. So it's like, he definitely was doing some bad things in Red Dead Redemption 1. So I think I have to put him a little higher, even though you don't really know what Bill was doing himself. He definitely was a leader of that gang, so he has to go into S tier for the natural born killers tier. In fifth place, about Sadie Adler. Well, you might not see as much of like her kills. I mean, you do get to see her murdering this O'Driscoll here, which is definitely first degree murder, and the fact that you actually get to see a lot more than someone like Bill, like that you definitely see a lot less than like Dutch, Micah, or Arthur or John. You get to see more than someone like Bill, and I feel like that's why she has to go above Bill, even though Bill probably commit way more crimes than Sadie did as a whole. I feel like just the fact that you can't really see any of Sadie's crimes besides the couple times like she murders O'Driscoll's and like the times that she helped Colm to hang, which I guess isn't really like an actual bad thing at all. Like she kills a lot of people, but they're all kind of in this weird moral judgment standard where it's like all bad guys must die. I don't know. I still think she is like definitely a natural born killer, and she does do just a ton of extremely bad things while she is a bounty hunter, just like extremely immoral and like probably not legal things while she is a bounty hunter. She has to be in S tier just because you get to see a lot more of her than someone like Hosea or Bill, who may have commit more crimes than her. So she has to go into S tier, the natural born killers tier. In fourth place, I've got John Marson. John Marson for sure is a man who's a killer and has killed a lot of people. And I mean, you know it just because you've played the games and you've played as him and you've killed people as him and you've not killed people as him as well. So like, of course, John has to go into S tier. I mean, just playing the games, like you have to kill a lot of people. And, you know, I definitely think some of his murders have to be in cold blood, but just the fact that he and Arthur have been in the Van der Linde gang for so long, they have to have been involved in a lot of different things. And like, even when John like stops being a criminal, one of the first thing he does is like, I mean, I guess it's not the first thing because like he's been killing people while he's tried to not be a criminal. So I think that really shows the type of person John is for a while. And he's a killer. He's a natural born killer. And like it took him a while to like stop being a killer and like become a family man. So I think John clearly has to go into S tier. He's probably killed over like hundreds of people like throughout the canon of the game, so he definitely has to go into S tier, and he's committed a ton of other crimes. Like you go into Red Dead Redemption 1 and there's a time when the FBI agent like lists off all the crimes and he's like, you've done all these different things, you have 400 counts of bank robbery. So John is definitely up here for committing crimes and, you know, just doing a lot of bad things overall. In third place, it's Arthur Morgan. I feel like Arthur is everything that John did, just a little bit more, probably just because he was Dutch's right-hand man. Like, you play the game and you're doing all the crimes the entire time. And John is still involved in a lot of them, but like, it's Arthur who's everyone's bitch and, you know, is doing all the crimes, doing all the bad things. So I think Arthur has to go one slot higher, but I feel like him and John are pretty much at the same level. They've murdered thousands of people potentially each, and like definitely are natural born killers. They've also robbed a ton of things. They've just, you know, you play as Arthur and you get to do all these things as well. So, I mean, if you've ever robbed a bank or killed someone in Red Dead Redemption, you added one to Arthur's kill count. So, I mean, clearly he has committed a ton of crimes, and he also has to go into the S tier, the natural born killers tier. In second place, I've got Micah Bell. Micah Bell has done basically the same things that Arthur and John have done, probably to a little bit more of an extent. You know, he's a rapist. He has done a lot of bad things, just in general. And I think that kind of means that Micah might be a little worse than them. And the fact that he ran a gang for a while after like Arthur was dead and John was like not doing as much, I feel like that has to put him a little bit higher on the crimes committed, because they're probably pretty similarly by the end of like Arthur's life in Red Dead Redemption 2. So I think that has to put Micah a little bit higher than Arthur and John, but I don't think it's that big of a difference. Like, I think these guys are all, you know, in here where if they went to jail, they'd literally be facing like thousands of counts of murder, and they'd be facing millions of years in jail at that point. So I think, yeah, he's probably in a similar level, and I think he also has to go into S tier, into the natural born killers tier. And first place, who else could it be besides Dutch Van der Linde? This is the guy who Milton was like, yo, if you guys want to rat out, like, Arthur, this is the guy with 100 counts of murder on his belt. And he's like, yo, if you want to rat out Dutch, we'll clean your record. Like that's how badly people want to get Dutch. And while Dutch himself probably hasn't murdered as many people as John, Arthur, or Micah, he's been the mastermind behind it. So he gets accomplice crimes for every single crime committed by any member of his gang. If he went to prison, he'd probably be facing 10 times as much of a sentence as Micah was. So, you know, Dutch is probably the biggest criminal in the entire thing. Of course, he is the criminal mastermind behind all of it. Like, they're not going to be able to say, oh, you killed 100 bajillion people and you're going to go to jail for this long. But they do know Dutch was the criminal mastermind behind it. And if he was eventually captured, he would be going to jail for as long as possible because of the things that his gang members did, even if he didn't necessarily commit them himself. So he definitely has to go into S tier, the natural born killers tier, even if Dutch himself isn't that much of a natural born killer. So that wraps up my Van der Linde gang ranking of how many crimes they've committed. It has been a while since I made a video, but I'm going to be back on it, and I'm going to be probably making a guns tier list and a Red Dead Redemption Iceberg video. And if you guys do want to see more videos, they should be popping up right now, so go click on one of them if you do want to see it.